was raining hard when Daniel stopped his car in front of the old roadside inn, the kind of place you only notice when you are lost and desperate. Its neon sign flickering in the darkness with a tired hum that said vacancy. The building looked worn out, its paint peeling like dead skin, and for a moment he thought about sleeping in the car, but the storm was too violent, the wind shaking the trees like angry spirits. So he stepped out and ran toward the dim glow of the reception light. Inside the lobby, the smell of mildew and damp wood wrapped around him like a wet blanket, and behind the desk stood an old man with hollow cheeks and a polite but distant smile that never touched his pale eyes. "Welcome," the man said softly, his voice dry as paper. "You'll be in room 14. Daniel hesitated and glanced at the register where the man pointed, his finger long and thin like a dead branch, and noticed that the names above his were faded, some smudged, others scratched out entirely as if someone tried to erase them. He signed anyway, his handwriting shaky from the cold, and took the key the old man slid toward him, its brass tag engraved with a simple 14. There was something strange about the way the old man watched him as he walked to the hallway, something that felt like a warning that never became words, and Daniel couldn't shake the feeling even as he reached the end of the narrow corridor where the lights buzzed like dying insects. Room 14 was the last door on the left, and when he pushed it open, the air inside was colder than the hallway, heavy with the smell of old smoke and something faintly metallic, like rust or blood. He couldn't tell which. The room looked ordinary enough at first glance. A bed with a faded floral spread, a dresser with a cracked mirror, and a window that rattled softly against the wind, but there was a feeling in there, something quiet and watchful. And for a moment Daniel thought he heard a whisper, but when he turned sharply, nothing was there. He shook it off, threw his bag on the chair, and sat on the bed that creaked like old bones under his weight, telling himself he was just tired, just imagining things after the long drive and the storm. But the feeling didn't go away, and as the hours passed and midnight crept in, the whispers returned, soft at first like a breeze moving through dry leaves, then clearer, more like words spoken just out of reach, and they were coming from the mirror. Daniel stared at his reflection, pale in the flickering light, and for a moment he thought his reflection didn't move when he did, that it lagged a second behind, as if it wasn't a reflection at all but something watching him from the other side. He got up, walked toward the mirror slowly, and saw condensation forming on the glass as if someone was breathing from inside, and then a single word appeared in the fog, written by an invisible finger. "Stay." Daniel stumbled back, his heart slamming against his ribs, and turned toward the door, but it was closed, locked, and when he reached for the handle it wouldn't turn. Panic clawed up his throat as the whispers grew louder, overlapping voices now, male and female, all saying the same thing in a tone that was almost pleading but somehow angry. "Stay with us, stay with us, stay with us." He pounded on the door, screaming for help, but the hallway was silent, no footsteps, no sound of anyone coming, just the wind outside howling like something alive. When he turned back toward the mirror, the reflection was gone. There was no Daniel in the glass anymore, only the room behind him and a figure standing where he should have been, tall and thin with skin like stretched parchment, and a face that was nothing but a mouth, wide and black and grinning. The lights went out then, plunging the room into darkness so complete it felt like drowning, and in that dark he heard the bed creak as if someone had sat down, and then a whisper right next to his ear, warm and wet against his skin, saying thank you for coming back. Daniel screamed and slammed his fists against the door until his hands bled, but the door never opened, and when morning came and the old man unlocked the room, there was no sign of Daniel at all, only the key lying on the bedspread and the mirror cracked down the center like something had pushed from inside trying to get out. That night, when the old man returned to the desk, he opened the register and smiled as he wrote the name Daniel on the line under the others, then gently scratched out the last name so it could never leave. And in the silence of the inn, down the hallway where room 14 waited, the whispering began again, because the room always needed another guest. The wind outside beat against the walls like angry fists as Daniel pressed his ear to the cold wood of the door, his breath sharp and ragged, every muscle in his body tense with animal fear. He whispered, "Please God, let me out," his voice trembling like a child's, but there was no answer except the steady tap of water dripping from somewhere in the room. When he turned toward the sound, his eyes adjusted to the dim sliver of light sneaking through the curtains, and that was when he saw the wet footprints on the carpet. Not his, leading from the bathroom to the bed and then to the mirror, each one glistening like fresh blood even in the weak glow. His throat tightened as he forced himself to follow the trail with his eyes, and when he reached the mirror, he wished he hadn't. The cracks had spread like spider webs, jagged and sharp, and behind them, behind the glass, there were faces, dozens of them, pale and sunken with eyes like empty sockets and mouths open in silent screams, all pressing against the glass as if desperate to break through. Daniel staggered back, hitting the edge of the bed, and that was when something cold touched his ankle, a grip like ice closing around his skin. He looked down and saw a hand, gray and thin with black nails curling like claws, reaching from under the bed. Daniel kicked violently, tearing free, and the hand slid back into the darkness with a sound like nails scraping wood. His breath came in sharp bursts as he leapt onto the bed, eyes darting wildly, and then he heard it again, the whisper, this time clearer and closer. A voice that sounded like his mother but warped, hollow, wrong, saying, "It's okay, Daniel, it's safe now, come under, come home." He screamed no and leapt for the door, pounding it with all his strength until his knuckles split and blood smeared across the faded paint. But the door held, silent and unyielding like the house itself wanted him to stay. The voices rose then, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all chanting his name in perfect unison, the sound vibrating through the walls like a heartbeat, and the light from the bathroom flickered on without warning, spilling across the room like a sickly glow. He turned toward it slowly, dread crawling up his spine, and in the doorway stood a figure, tall and thin with that same black grin stretching wider than any human mouth should, arms dangling like broken branches, head tilting with a crack that sounded like splintering wood. Daniel stumbled back onto the bed as the figure moved closer, its feet not touching the ground, its body jerking like a puppet yanked by invisible strings. And with every step the lights flickered faster until they died completely, plunging the room into blackness so deep it felt like falling into a pit. His scream tore through the dark, raw and desperate, but no one heard because no one ever hears in room 14. When silence returned, it was as if the storm outside had swallowed the world whole, and when the old man came in the morning, the bed was empty, the mirror was whole again, and on the wall above the headboard, written in something dark and wet, were two words that hadn't been there before. "Welcome home." The old man stood there for a long time, staring at the words, then turned and walked back to the front desk without a sound. He opened the guest book slowly, the pages brittle and yellowed, and wrote Daniel's name beneath the others, each one etched like a gravestone, and when he finished, he smiled that same cold smile and whispered softly, "One more for the house." Down the hall, room 14 waited, its silence heavy and patient, and if you listened closely, past the hum of the neon sign and the whisper of the rain, you could almost hear them, the voices calling from behind the door, low and hungry, because the room was never truly empty, not in 30 years, not ever. And when night fell again and the storm returned, the neon sign flickered vacancy once more, because room 14 was ready for its next guest. Daniel sat frozen on the edge of the bed, his chest heaving in shallow bursts as the last echo of his own scream dissolved into the suffocating dark. His hands trembled violently, slick with blood and sweat, his nails cracked from clawing at the door. He could feel it, the weight of the silence pressing down on him like a physical thing, heavy and thick, broken only by the occasional groan of the old building shifting against the wind. He didn't move for what felt like hours, too afraid to look toward the bathroom where the thing had stood, too afraid to look at the mirror where those faces had stared. But when the first faint hum of the neon sign outside bled through the rain, he realized the lights were back on. Weak, flickering, but there. He forced himself to lift his head, every muscle stiff and aching, and his eyes swept across the room, catching on something that hadn't been there before. On the dresser, beside the cracked lamp, lay a stack of black and white photographs, their edges curling and yellowed with age. His heart thudded painfully as he reached for them, his fingers trembling as he lifted the first one into the dim glow. It showed the same room he was in now, but decades earlier when the wallpaper was fresh and the bedspread bright. And in the center of the frame stood a man, tall and smiling, his arm around a woman whose face seemed blurred as though she had moved at the last second. Behind them in the mirror was something else, a shape, faint and twisted, lurking in the glass, its grin unmistakable. Daniel dropped the photo with a strangled gasp, but it only fluttered to the carpet, landing face up as if mocking him. He picked up another, then another, each one worse than the last, different guests at different times, all smiling stiffly. And in every mirror, in every shot, that same shape looming closer with each decade, its grin stretching wider until in the final photo there was no couple at all. Just the room empty except for the thing filling the glass, its black mouth open as if laughing. Daniel shoved the photos back onto the dresser, his hands shaking so badly they spilled across the floor. And that was when he saw it, the old rotary phone sitting in the corner on a small wooden table, something he hadn't noticed before. Its cord trailed into the wall like a dead vein, coated in dust so thick it looked untouched for years. He stared at it for a long moment, his pulse pounding in his ears before slowly, very slowly, lifting the receiver to check. No dial tone, just silence. He exhaled a shaky breath, almost laughing at his own fear when a click snapped through the line like a bone breaking, followed by static that hissed and writhed like snakes. Then, a voice. A whisper so close it felt like it was inside his head, low and wet and impossibly familiar, saying Daniel. His blood turned to ice as the whisper dragged his name out slowly, stretching it into something wrong, something hungry. He dropped the receiver, but it didn't fall. It hung there dangling, and the voice kept speaking, soft and eager, saying, "You belong here now. You've always belonged. Come and see what's behind the glass." Daniel kicked the table over, sending the phone crashing to the floor where it split open like an egg, wires spilling like veins, but the voice didn't stop. It grew louder, echoing through the room though the phone lay in pieces. And then, suddenly, the mirror spoke too. The glass pulsed like water, its cracks glowing faintly as if veins of light ran through it, and the faces pressed closer, mouths moving in unison with the whisper, all chanting the same thing now, "Come home, come home, come home." Daniel staggered back, his heel striking the bed frame, and that was when the floor beneath him groaned like something waking from a long sleep. He froze as a fissure split the carpet, thin and jagged, and from it came a sound that churned his stomach, the sound of something crawling beneath, nails scratching wood, limbs dragging slow and deliberate. His breath hitched as the bed shifted, rising slightly on one side as if something massive pushed from underneath, and before he could move, a pale hand shot out, clutching his ankle with a force that felt like bones snapping. Daniel screamed, kicking wildly, his foot connecting with the edge of the dresser, sending splinters flying as the drawer burst open and spilled its contents across the floor. Letters, dozens of them, stained and torn, each one beginning the same way. "I can't leave. I hear them every night. Please help me." He wrenched free from the hand and scrambled toward the door, but the knob was gone. Not locked. Gone. Just a flat expanse of wood where it had been, smooth as skin, and behind him, the bed collapsed as something heaved out from underneath, rising slow and tall, its limbs unfolding like broken joints snapping into place. Daniel didn't turn. He couldn't. He pressed himself flat against the door, his nails digging into the wood until they split and the voices rose higher, so loud they vibrated in his teeth, screaming now, laughing. And through it all, that one voice cut clear, deep and cold and absolute, saying, "Welcome back, Daniel." The last thing he saw was the mirror glowing brighter than the lamp ever had, its surface rippling like a black ocean, and then hands, Dozens of them shot out, gray and slick, wrapping around his arms, his neck, his face, dragging him toward the glass. He fought, he screamed until his throat tore, but they pulled harder, jerking him through with a sound like flesh tearing and bone snapping, and then he was gone. The mirror stilled, smooth and silent, showing only the room once more, empty except for the faint smear of blood on the floor where Daniel's shoes had scraped. Morning came pale and quiet, the storm gone as if it had never been, and the old man moved down the hall with slow, measured steps, his shadow stretching long in the weak light. He opened room 14 without knocking, as he always did, and found it just as before. The bed neatly made, the air cold and still, and on the dresser a new photograph waiting, still wet as though fresh from a darkroom, showing Daniel standing stiff and pale, his smile too wide, and behind him in the mirror that shape closer than ever, grinning black and endless. The old man carried the photo back to the front desk, sliding it into a drawer heavy with others, then opened the register and wrote Daniel's name beneath the rest before scratching it out slowly, the sound like a blade across bone. He closed the book with care, sat back in his chair and listened. Down the hall the voices had already started again, soft and coaxing, because room 14 was never empty. It had not been empty for 30 years. And tonight, the neon sign would flicker vacancy once more.